JoKer. Level 6 upgrade. So today I'm going to be installing RPM's rod ends. I've been having a ton of issues with this E-Revo stripping the rod ends just due to how heavy it is. Any kind of crash you get into, those rod ends will easily strip. So hopefully these are going to help, but it's not the only thing I'm going to do. I'm also going to be doing a modification using the GTR rebuild shock kit. And I also got some RIT dye as well as some red carbon fiber. So let's go ahead and get things started. So as you guys can see, there's two different sizes. We have the short ones that go on the push rods and the long ones that go on the camber links and the turnbuckles. Those ones I'm not having any issues with yet. It's these short ones on the push rods that keep stripping, so I'm going to be replacing those. Each one is held in with two screws, one that is attached to the rocker and the other one that is attached to the bottom of the A-arm. So now that I got the push rod off, I put it on a piece of paper and marked each end. That way I can have it at the original length before I take off the rod ends. Now I need to go ahead and get the steel hollow balls out. I'm just going to get some pliers and I'm just going to wedge it out. Just like that. Now, in order to unscrew it, I'm just going to get one of my hex screwdrivers and unscrew it. And here's a quick comparison between the stock ones and the RPM ones. You can tell that the RPM ones are not as long, but they are definitely thicker. So hopefully that reinforcement is going to hold a bit better. So now it's just a reverse process. I'm just going to go ahead and screw one in on each side and make sure that it's at the proper length. Next up, I need to go ahead and reinstall the hollow balls. I'm just going to slide it into one side, get the pliers, and push them in. Now I can go ahead and reinstall these. And just a quick note, the push rods in the front are identical to the ones in the back. So I feel like somebody's going to ask, so I should go ahead and talk about it real quick. Now when I screw the RPM rod ends all the way down, you can see that it does significantly shorten the length of the push rod. Now what that's going to do is it's going to cause the ride height of the E-Revo to drop a little bit. Is that going to change the performance? Yes. If you're a basic basher, you're not going to really notice, but for anyone who's into tuning their RC or into racing, yes, you are going to notice a difference. There is adjustable holes on the bottom of the A-arm. But if I use that inner hole to restore the height, it's going to cause a more direct flow of force from the tire to the shock, which is going to cause the RC to be more bouncy. If I use the outer hole, it's going to distort that flow, which is going to cause it to ride smoother. And that's pretty much all that I know about the adjustments of camber links and all that. So if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. But I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a compromise. I have very strong shock springs on this RC. So I'm going to screw these RPM rod ends down enough where it's going to be a lot of support, but they're not going to be as long as the stock length. Now that that's taken care of, my mind is a little bit more at ease. And if or when I strip the rod ends, I do have a few more replacements. Now, to put my mind further at ease, it's time for that modification. So I need to go ahead and take off the rear shocks because these rear shock rod ends strip all the time. This is the one part I have to replace the most out of everything. So hopefully this little modification does a trick. But anyways, the rear shocks are held in with two screws. Now if you have the original cage that goes on top of it, you're going to have to undo 7 screws. But for me, I only have to undo 4 screws to get each shock out. Alright, so now that I got the shocks off, I need to go ahead and take them apart. First, I'm going to go ahead and contract that and pull off the brace, slide off the shock spring, and then I need to undo the cap. Now I need to empty all the oil. Now I need to go ahead and take off this rod end. I'm going to pinch it with some paper towel because I do not want to scratch that shaft. Alright, now we're going to pull off that part. We're going to unscrew the base just a little bit to loosen up the seals, and then we're going to push this out. Now inside the rebuild kit, the part that you're looking for is this. Yes, it's the same part that goes on the bottom of the shaft outside of the shock body. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to put one on the inside. It doesn't really matter which way you put it in. I'm going to go ahead and put it in that way. But we're going to install that on the inside and then push the shaft back out. Screw this down. Put this part back on. and then reinstall the rod end. So let me go ahead and explain how this modification works. This blue part is a dampener. Now, when you land really hard, your shock's gonna bottom out, and instead of these two hard pieces hitting together causing a lot of force, all that impact's gonna go into this blue piece, which is made of a softer material, and it's gonna absorb the impact, softening the blow. When you put one on the inside, it's gonna cause that same safety when it gets pulled out. When you crash and your tire gets flung down really hard, it's gonna pull on the shock, and all that force is gonna go into this rod end or into the rod ends on the push rods, which is gonna strip them. But with that dampener in there, it's gonna soften the blow and keep that from happening. So with that being explained, it's time to go ahead and refill this shock up with some oil. Now remember, when you fill your shock body full of shock oil, you need to go ahead and let it sit so all the bubbles raise to the top. You don't want any air in there when you seal this back up. Now that I got the shock cap with the bladder, I'm going to go ahead and screw this back down. Next up, I'm going to get the shock spring, slide that down, compress it, and put back on the shock spring brace. And that's it. Now it's time to do the other one. So now it's time to go ahead and focus on these servos because they are bright blue and they're driving me nuts because it is clashing with the red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take them out. Each one is held in with 4 screws on top and a screw on bottom holding on the servo horn. But in order for me to go ahead and get full access to this, I'm going to go ahead and take off the servo cage. It's held in with 2 screws. Alright, with the guard out of the way, I have full access to the screw to the horn. Now before I take it off, I'm going to go ahead and mark it down with an X-Acto knife. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a mark on the servo horn and the servo itself. I want these measurements to stay exactly the same. This is a very precise part of the RC. If the servo's adjustment are too much altered, then the servos are going to fight with each other and burn one another out, and I do not want to replace one of these. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and make a mark. With that little notch being made, I can go ahead and undo this screw and pull off the servo. So I'm not going to be able to wrap this whole servo with the carbon fiber wrap, especially this top part, because it's just too complicated. I will be able to do it with this body very easily. So for this top part, I'm going to go ahead and take it off by undoing these 4 screws. Now with the bottom, it can easily pop off, but I don't need to take that off. What I need to do is take the top off. So I'm going to get this part and I'm going to push it while pulling down on the sides, and the cap should pull right on off. Now I just got to leave all that just like this. Make sure it doesn't get dirty or lose any of the gears, and now I can go ahead and dye this part. So after an hour of letting these things sit in the dye, this is as dark as it could get. You can see that it's a little bit darker than the original color, but nowhere near as dark as I was hoping for. Unfortunately, there's not much else I can do right now, so I'm just gonna go ahead and call it a bust and put these back together and at least do the wrap for the sides. So slide on the top, make sure that the seal's on properly, and reinstall the 4 screws. Alright, now it's time to just go ahead and put the wrap around it. Alright, so the servos have been wrapped, so I'm just going to put those back in and reinstall the 4 screws that hold in each one. On the bottom, I reattach the servo horns, making sure that the marks lined up so everything is going to be set up just like how it was. Now I can go ahead and reattach the screw that holds down the servo horn and reattach the servo cage. Alright, and I am done with this upgrade. Well, I guess I'm going to have a little bit more fun with the carbon fiber wrap. There is this weird glossy part on the remote. Alright, that's better. And I went ahead and put some carbon fiber wrap on top of the gear cover. And I have to say, so far it is looking a lot better. Last things I need to take care of course, is the motor mount plate, and well, the ESC, that's going to be a tricky one. Still haven't really thought of a way of covering that up. Maybe if I get some shrink wrap, maybe I can pull that off. I don't know. I'll have to look into it more. But for now, JoKer is looking pretty darn good. So as always, before I end this video, I want to go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who helps me on Patreon. Because of you guys, these upgrades are possible. And that was JoKer's level 6 upgrade.